The story follows a young man, Kelvin, who is reincarnated into the fantasy world by the supreme being of reincarnation. The supreme being in charge made a mistake that cost Kelvin his life. To correct his mistake, he asked the supreme being of reincarnation for help. Kelvin will reincarnate into the fantasy world, but without his previous memories. Kelvin has been given the opportunity to choose different skill sets that will help him in his new life. During his reincarnation, he apparently fell in love with the supreme being of reincarnation, but he won't be remembering all of that once he wakes up. Kelvin wakes up in the middle of the woods. The status screen appears in front of him, and he is required to press start in order to continue. There is a voice communicating with Kelvin, and it turns out that the voice belongs to the supreme being of creation, Melfina. Kelvin had asked Melfina to be his servant when he was asked to pick a wish. Kelvin takes a look at his status and realizes that he is a summoner. Melfina tells Kelvin to go to the nearest town, Parth, to register as an adventurer. For now, Kelvin can only hear Melfina's voice until he is powerful enough to summon her. Melfina agreed to be his servant because she decided to take a break from work. She has her assistants working for her in the meantime. Kelvin walks into a guild to register as an adventurer. Melfina tells him not to register as a summoner because S-rank summoners are very rare. They rarely have one per nation. The nation will take interest in him once they find out that he's a summoner, an S-rank for that matter. Kelvin then registers as a green mage instead. He is given the F-rank card. The receptionist Ange informs him that he can take tasks that are one level above his. However, he will not receive extra points if he completes the task. Failure to complete the tasks also brings a penalty. Completing 10 tasks in a row means promotion to the next rank. For his first task, he is told to defeat at least 3 blue slimes. Kelvin finds the slimes, and Melfina tells him that he can form a contract with one of the slimes. However, the slime needs to weaken, and it needs to agree to the contract deal. Kelvin goes after one of the slimes, but it wasn't as easy as he thought. The slimes keep playing with him till Kelvin manages to knock it to the ground. He then stretches out his hand and forms a contract with the blue slime. The slime vanishes into Kevin's consciousness, and he can summon the slime anytime he wants. Kelvin names the slime Clotho. There is also networking in his consciousness that his servants can use to communicate. This is how Melfina is communicating with Kelvin, and Clotho can also communicate with the duo now. Kelvin, forming a contract with Clotho, has increased Clotho's level, and he is now stronger. Kelvin then tries his summoning skills and uses them to summon Clotho. He then tasks Clotho to help him defeat 3 blue slimes. Clotho absorbs the slimes but desynthesizes their cores so that Kelvin can use them as proof. After completing his task, Kelvin reports back to the guild, and he is paid for the job. Ange directs Kelvin to the area where he can get an inn to sleep. On his way to the inn, he passes through an alley where he sees some slavers displaying their slaves for sale. Among the slaves is an elven girl, but Kelvin has no money to buy her and leaves. Kelvin makes his way to the Spirit Song Inn. He meets with the receptionist, Claire. Claire shows him to his room and also prepares a meal for him. This signals his journey and adventure in another world. Soon afterward, Kelvin is promoted to E rank after completing the required number of tasks. Ange suggests that Kelvin form a party of his own because he will start taking on more difficult tasks. Kelvin thinks to himself that he doesn't need a party since he has Clotho. Ange asks Kelvin if he's from another world because he is quite strong for a beginner, but Kelvin prefers not to answer. As Kelvin talks about what tasks he should take on next, an adventurer, Cashel, enters. He suggests that Kelvin take down the Black Ghost Knight. Cashel introduces himself as a D-rank adventurer to Kelvin. Unknown to Kelvin, this is Cashel's usual plot to take on newbies. He lets them believe that he is weak, and then humiliates them. Everyone in the guild is afraid of Cashel because he is actually a B-rank adventurer. Cashel says his party is going after the Black Ghost Knight, and he wants Kelvin to join them. Ange tries to protest that the task will be too tough for Kelvin, but Cashel shuts her up. Kelvin then tells Cashel that he is not interested in joining his party to defeat the Black Ghost Knight. Kelvin uses his appraisal eye to check Cashel's stats and finds out that he has been lying about his stat and rank. He also has a worrisome title, and Kelvin realizes that Cashel will not back down. Kelvin then makes Cashel a deal. He will compete against Cashel and his party. Whoever defeats the knight first will be the winner of the competition. Cashel is confident and immediately accepts the challenge. Cashel meets up with one of his party members, Gimmel. He tells Cashel that his appraisal eye is C rank, and he still can't view Kelvin's stats. Gimmel suggests that Kevin's concealment will be C rank at least. Another of the party members, Raj, who appears to be the muscle of the party, can't wait to crush Kelvin. Later on, Cashel and his party get to the old castle to find out that all the undead monsters have been defeated already. What's left is just the Black Ghost Knight. Kelvin reveals himself and says he has been waiting for them. Kelvin reveals that he knows of their plans to cause him harm. Apparently, they have been killing other adventurers to increase their own rank points instead of just completing tasks. Raj is the first to come after Kelvin, but he traps him in a mud vine. Gimel tries to escape, but he is stopped by a Clotho. Turns out that Clotho has now evolved into a slime Glutonia during all their tasks. His title is now a devourer, and he is even stronger. However, he can go back to his usual size at will. Together, they defeat Cashel and his party. After defeating the 3 corrupt adventurers, Kelvin decides that it is time for the main event. He opens the door leading to the room where the knight is waiting. Kelvin approaches the knight and lets him know of his plan to make him a member of his party. This surprises the knight and says most people just come at him with their swords. The duo sits down to have a conversation. He tells Kelvin that he was once human, but he is not ready to tell Kelvin the reason he turned into a monster. The knight says he has no country or king to fight for again. He reveals that his name is Gerard, but Kelvin will have to defeat him before he can form a contract with him. A battle ensues between the duo, and during the fight, Gerard reveals why he has been staying alive. He was once the captain of the knights in his small country, Alcarl. One day, an elf, Jidora, from the western continent came with a proposal for the king. Jidora came on behalf of the Lizea Empire, and he asked the king to work for them. He wants the king and military to destroy the holy empire of Daramis. However, the king refused, and in a few days, everyone in Alcarl died. Gerard refused to die so that he will still be able to avenge the death of his family and his country. Kelvin hears this and uses everything in his power to defeat Gerard. Gerard concedes defeat and forms a contract with Kelvin. Shortly afterward, Kelvin takes a chunk of the knight's armor back to the guild as proof. He also hands over Cashel and his party for punishment. With this, Kelvin now has 3 beings working for him. The 3 beings are Melfina, Clotho, and Gerard. Melfina's level is immeasurable because she is a supreme being. Up next, Kelvin meets with the guildmaster, Leo. Leo's appraisal eye is A rank, and this makes it difficult for Kelvin to hide his stats. Leo sees through him easily and quickly figures out that Kelvin is from another world. Kelvin wants to get defensive about who he is, but Gerard advises him to loosen up. He can't hide his stats forever, and he also needs friends that he can share his secrets with. Leo asks Kelvin if he is a summoner, and Kelvin affirms this. Kelvin then asks why Leo didn't stop Cashel and his party since his appraisal eye can see what they are up to. Leo apologizes and says Cashel is a noble from the militant nation of Tricen. He needed proof that tied directly to Cashel to avoid an international incident. Leo reveals that he is not Kelvin's enemy but his friend. In fact, he has met others like him that are from another world. Leo says the heroes of the Holy Empire of Daramis are from another world. Melfina confirms this and says she was the one that reincarnated them. The priestess of Daramis heard the prophecy of the Supreme Being and summoned the heroes. Turns out that the revival of the Demon King is at hand. This is the reason monsters across the continent have grown more violent. Leo tells Kelvin that he understands why he was hiding his status as a summoner. He doesn't want to be dragged into political scuffles. Leo assures him that if he is willing to help, he will make sure that Kelvin has his freedom and no one finds out about his status. Kelvin is already a S-rank adventurer, and Leo is willing to help him climb to the top. Shortly afterward, Kelvin is promoted to B rank. Claire prepares a good dish for Kelvin to celebrate his promotion. Later on, Melfina tells Kelvin that the priestess of the Holy Empire of Daramis performed a summoning ritual. Melfina then finds some smart-looking pretty boys and girls to reincarnate. Melfina says the heroes will be on a decent level now. Kelvin leaves his room to go shopping. He reveals his plan to find the slave elven girl and buy her. Kelvin plans to train her and add her to the party. When he gets there, Kelvin pays the master his money. He learns that there is a curse on the girl that doesn't allow people to touch her. The girl thanks Kelvin for purchasing her and reveals that her name is Eiffel. Kelvin then uses his magic to break the curse, and Eiffel is finally able to touch someone without setting them on fire. Kelvin takes Eiffel back to the inn and Claire takes care of her. After she is done bathing and washing her, Eiffel looks young and beautiful. Eiffel promises to do her best in serving Kelvin. Kelvin realizes that Claire made a maid outfit for Eiffel, but it looks good on her nonetheless. After that, the duo eats a meal prepared by Claire. The food was so delicious that Eiffel cried while eating. Kelvin then gives Eiffel the choice to pick her own skills. When it was time to sleep, Claire tells Kelvin that there is no available room again. Kelvin is forced to share a bed with Eiffel. Up next, Eiffel used her points on archery, sightseeing, and sewing. Kelvin also picked up blacksmithing skills. Eiffel has started designing clothes herself, and the maid outfit she is wearing currently is designed by her. The combination of her high-level archery skill, red magic, and Fire Dragon King's Grace gave her her original technique. Shortly afterward, Kelvin will be eligible for A rank once he completes one more task. Aphil is also being promoted to B rank within a short time. After giving out their report at the guild, Aphil asks Kelvin to follow her out the next day, and Kelvin hesitantly agrees. Meanwhile, Melfina has left to attend to an official business. Melfina will be temporarily unavailable for the time being. The following day, Kelvin meets with Ethel and Ange. Ethel makes sure to look all nice and beautiful for the day's event. While they're having their fun, Tabra, the third prince of Trison, accosted them. He demands that the girls come with him because they are adorable. The guards try to come close to the girls, but Kelvin knocks them out easily. He then uses his magic to pin down Tabra and make him apologize for his crime. Tabra reveals that he came to Parth because he heard that a powerful adventurer has made Parth his home. He has plans to make the adventurer his servant, so that he will be more powerful. Kelvin says he is the adventurer he is looking for and knocks him out. The citizens, who have been watching everything unfold, applaud Kelvin for his heroic act. Elsewhere, Melfina reveals herself to the priestess of Daramus, Colette. She asks after the heroes, and Colette tells her that they are coping. Melfina tells Colette that she has sensed an evil presence in the western continent, and Colette should send the heroes there. Melfina warns Colette to keep the heroes away from Parth before disappearing again. Later that night, Aphil thanks Kelvin for saving her from the Crooked Prince. She also thanks Kelvin for freeing her and allowing her to know how it feels to touch someone. Aphil asks if she is attractive, and Kelvin says yes. Kelvin thinks to himself that he needs to buy a house ASAP to avoid sharing the same room with Aphil. The following day, Melfina comes back and he shows the party the heroes and their stats. Because Kelvin can't absorb Aphil into his consciousness, Clotho separates a chunk of himself to sit on Aphil's horn. This way, Aphil is able to participate in the servants' network conversation. Melfina hopes the heroes get stronger in preparation for their battle against the Demon King. She points out that Kelvin and his party are getting stronger each day. Kelvin showcases his blacksmith skill and reveals the weapons he just made. Aphil also showcases the new robes and armor she made for herself and the party members. Moments later, Kelvin is called to the guildmaster's office. Leo tells him that a demon has been found in the Hermit's Cave. Melfina says demons are one of the strongest races alongside dragons and angels. Leo asks for Kelvin's help because they don't know how strong the demon is yet. Kelvin accepts to help out. Kelvin gets to the cave, and the adventurers who found the dungeon fill him in on all the details. When entering the dungeon, Gerard takes the lead, Aphil and Kelvin follow while Clotho takes the rear. They get to the inner door, and Kelvin tells his party that he is sensing two life forms in the room. They enter the room and see a demon girl who is under a seal. Another demon appears and reveals that he is the archdemon, Victor. Kelvin opens his mouth in surprise because Victor is automatically an S-rank demon for him to be the archdemon. However, this doesn't move Kelvin because he is a lover of battles. In fact, he is wearing a smile when he finds out how strong Victor is. Victor tells the party that the girl they are looking at is the daughter of the Demon King, Gustav. Gustav kept it a secret so that his enemies would not use his daughter against him. Victor reveals that only humans can break the girl's seal, but he wouldn't want that. He wants to absorb the girl and become the Demon King himself. Victor summons his underlings, and a battle begins between the two parties. Gerard takes out the underlings with one swipe of his sword, while Kelvin takes out the ones Gerard misses. Victor uses a magic smoke bomb to try and sneak up on Kelvin, but Kelvin foils his attacks very easily. Aphil gets behind Victor and shoots him with her magical arrow. Gerard gets close to him and cuts off one of his arms. Victor concurs that Kelvin and his party are the second to do this much damage to him. This prompts Victor to activate his full magic power and gets even bigger and stronger. He attacks the party with his magic, and this weakens Gerard. He knocks Gerard to the floor, and he is getting the upper hand until Clotho releases a blister of attacks on him from above. This gives Kelvin and Aphil the chance to launch a devastating attack on Victor. Victor gets knocked to the floor and concedes defeat. Victor then reveals that he never planned to absorb the king's daughter. He says Kelvin wouldn't have fought hard even if he had not lied. Victor tells the story behind everything. Several hundred years ago, Gustav put him in charge of his daughter, Sarah. He was basically the one that raised her. He was living with her in a big mansion that Sarah cannot leave. Gustav did everything in his power to hide the fact that he has a daughter. Then one day, the hero attacked and came for Gustav. Victor was ready to fight and die for Gustav, but Gustav ordered him to continue watching over Sarah. If her existence should ever be known, other demons and even the hero would come after her. Gustav then puts a seal on her that only humans could break. If anyone but the hero should find her, she would be safe. When Gustav died, Sarah was sent to a distant land where Victor continued to watch over her even under her sealed state. Gustav hopes that one day, Sarah would be able to live peacefully without violence coming to her. Victor then reveals that he has been waiting for a time of peace so that Sarah's seal can be broken. She can then attain her position as the Demon King. Victor laments that all his plans have now failed. He begs Kelvin for a last wish. He begs Kelvin to let Sarah join his party and also show her the world. Sarah is probably awakening from her slumber already and would have been listening to their conversation already. Victor tells Kelvin to break the seal and Sarah's eyes will open. Kelvin offers to heal Victor, but he refuses and says he only served the Demon King and he is not ready to serve anyone else. After saying everything he has to say, Victor finally dies. Kelvin moves closer to Sarah and breaks the seal. Sarah wakes up and begins to cry because she just lost the last person she knows as family. Sarah forms a contract with Kelvin after she is fully conscious. The party finishes up in the cave and returns to the surface. Gustav already made a camouflaging hairband for Sarah before his death to conceal her horns. Kelvin lied to the adventurers that Sarah was one of the first adventurers to enter the cave. They show the adventurers the proof that the demon has been defeated and leave. Later on, Eiffel makes a new and stronger armor for Gerard. Gerard's stats have also gone up and he is now stronger than before. The party takes Sarah back to town and shows her what it means to be living among humans. Kelvin returns to the guild and he is officially promoted to the A rank. Ange then organizes a party to celebrate Kelvin's promotion. Later that night, Kelvin hears Sarah thinking aloud. She promises to make Victor proud and see the world as they have always planned to do. Up next, Kelvin makes a new armor called Queen's Terror for Sarah. He made the armor out of Victor's armor just like Sarah had requested. He also made a new sword for Gerard. After all his hard work, Kelvin is exhausted and starts to crave rice. He keeps screaming that he wants to eat rice. Shortly afterward, the party packs their things and begins a journey to a country called Toraj. Kelvin has two purposes on his journey to Toraj. The first one is to show Sarah the world. It is said that Toraj is a country that borders the ocean, and it is believed that they have a rice-like plant. It wasn't hard for Leo to grant them permission to travel to Toraj. It is revealed that Melfina has left temporarily again. Melfina has gone to do some adjustments to her body so she can enter one of her avatars. This will give Kelvin the strength to be able to summon her. This will also conceal her status as a supreme being. On the way to Toraj, the party is stopped by a gang of bandits known as the Black Wind. It is said that an A-rank adventurer from Trisen once defeated the gang, but it seems they are back in action. The gang tries to rob the party, but unknown to them, they just met a terrible fate. Kelvin tells Sarah to deal with the thieves, and in no time, she has defeated every single one of them. The thieves tell the party that they will be in big trouble when their boss learns of what happened. This excites Kelvin and says he can't wait to meet their boss. Soon afterward, they arrive at Toraj. Kelvin notices that Toraj looks like old Japan. They find their way to the region's guild. They hand over the thieves to the guild, and the party meets with the guildmaster Mist. Mist reveals that Leo has told her about Kelvin. In fact, Kelvin is what Leo talks about most of the time now. Mist informs Kelvin that Trisen's warrior Christopher defeated the Black Wind. However, it turns out that he is now running the show. They have started kidnapping girls to sell them as slaves. Mist is being careful about the issue because it might turn into an international incident if not careful. Kelvin learns that Christopher's level is 70, and his excitement reduces. He wishes that Christoph has more levels so that he will be a tough opponent. Just then, Sarah detects that a group of adventurers has just entered the town. Turns out that the heroes just arrived in town. Kelvin is happy because it just made things easier for them. Kelvin tells Mist to inform the heroes about Christoph. If Christoph is defeated by the heroes who actually stand for justice, there won't be any complaints. Up next, Kelvin and his party track down Christoph's base of operations. They storm in, defeat his underlings, and set the girls free. They find Christoph and his generals in their office. Kelvin defeats them very easily and leaves them lying on the floor. Later on, the heroes arrive at the hideout. They see the girls who tell them that the adventurers who rescued them have gone to the other room to fight the bandits. The girls beg the heroes to go and help the adventurers defeat the bandits. The heroes rush to the room and find Christoph and his men lying on the floor. The heroes are confused and believe that the people lying on the floor are the adventurers who need help. They find Kelvin and his party wearing a smirk on their faces. The heroes mistake Kelvin and his party for the band of thieves. Unknown to the heroes, Kelvin has planned this already. His intention all along is to trick the heroes and make them fight him. The heroes introduce themselves. Their leader Toya Kanzaki, his companion Setsuna Shiga, Nana Mizuoka, and finally, Miyabi Kuromiya. The heroes promise to bring justice upon Kelvin and his party. Kelvin then tells the heroes that he is ready to fight the four of them alone. Whoever loses will do whatever the winner wants. The heroes debate among themselves whether to fight Kelvin, and Kelvin is just reeking in all the excitement. The rest of Kelvin's party sits down while he gets ready to fight the heroes. The heroes finally make the decision to fight Kelvin. Kelvin tells his party members that he will be using his new item, the Skill Eater, as one of the weapons to fight the heroes. The heroes come at Kelvin, but he repels all their attacks pretty easily. Toya's friends are surprised that Toya's swordsmanship is S rank and Kelvin is going head-to-head with him with just bare hands. It's then revealed that Sarah had lent Kelvin her martial arts skills before the fight. As the fight rages on, Setsuna realizes that Toya is ready to fight to the death. She calls him to book and reminds him of the day that they were taken away from their classroom and brought into the fantasy world by Melfina. Setsuna lets Toya know that the only way they can defeat Kelvin is to work together. With this new motivation, the team combines their strength and attacks Kelvin. They use the most powerful spells they have to hold Kelvin down. Kelvin summons a golem to distract them, while he conjures up a new spell. Both two parties are surprised to see Kelvin come up with a new spell to break free from the hero's spells. They try to attack him with different spells again, but he is way above their league, and he easily displaces everything they throw at him. Toya laments while fighting Kelvin that he should use his powers for the greater good if he knows that he is very strong. Kelvin knocks him down and tells him not to try and force his own ideals and views on him. Later on, the heroes wake up to find out that Kelvin is not their enemy. He was the adventurer that defeated the bandits. He was only fighting them to know their weaknesses and teach them how to be better. Toya realizes this and bows to Kelvin. He declares Kelvin as his teacher from that moment forward. After the dust has settled, Kristoff and his gang are arrested and the girls are all set free. Kelvin takes the heroes to a cave for training. An S-rank dungeon boss surfaced in the cave and Kelvin had to defeat it. Kelvin tells Toya and his party that they still need to work very hard before they can face S-rank monsters. Days later, Toya and his party prepare to leave the town. They thank Kelvin for all his help. Kelvin gives them pendants as parting gifts. Toya promises to be stronger the next time they meet. After their departure, Kelvin reveals that the pendants he gave the heroes are stat boosters. This will help them to grow stronger and quicker. He then asks Gerard if Lizea is across the sea to the west, and he says yes. Let's not forget that Lizea was the country that destroyed Gerard's home. Kelvin has not forgotten this, and plans to punish them for their sins. Kelvin wants to get stronger and better before taking on Lizea. Minutes later, Kelvin is informed that the country's king wants to see them. Upon getting to the palace, Kelvin notices that the palace is built like the typical Japanese palace. Gerard informs him that the first ruler of the country is rumored to have come from another world. They enter the palace and Kelvin sees that it also has the same settings as Japanese palaces. They are welcomed by the current ruler of Toraj, Tsubaki Fujiwara. Upon hearing her name, Kelvin thinks to himself that the name is definitely a Japanese name. This seals his assumption that the country's first ruler must have been from Japan. This must also be the reason why they are the only country that has rice. Tsubaki says they would have held a celebration for the party's good deed, but Trisen is involved. They are trying to put things under wraps to prevent suspicion from the citizens. Tsubaki asks Kelvin to name anything he wants. Kelvin says he wants rice, and Tsubaki is surprised. She says Kelvin could have asked for title, money, or status, but he chose rice. Kelvin reveals that he doesn't want anything that will tie him down. He prefers to be free because he is an adventurer. Because of this, Tsubaki promises to feed Kelvin with all the rice he wants. She will also send rice to him if he runs out of rice. Kelvin and his party is served with rice, and Kelvin enjoys the meal so much that he consumes a whole lot. During the banquet, Ethel is busy learning the Japanese recipes from Tsubaki. This will help her to prepare Japanese dishes in the future. Later on, Ethel prepares her first Japanese dish and Kelvin praises her for getting it right. After all, Ethel's cooking skill is S rank. Tsubaki wants Kelvin and his party to stay in Toraj, but he says they need to leave for Parth very soon. Tsubaki even tries to get Kelvin to marry her, but he humbly declines the offer. Tsubaki tells Kelvin that she has a special way to send them back home. She reveals that the palace has a teleporter. However, no one can just use it anyhow. You have to be given permission from the receiving side too. The reason Kelvin and his party would be able to use it is because Leo already inscribed the permission sequence into their guild cards. Kelvin is surprised that Leo didn't tell them about this. The party takes the teleporter and returns to Parth. Kelvin buys a house after returning to Parth. The house has enough room for everyone. Clotho says he wants to stay outside in the yard and Kelvin agrees. Shortly afterward, Ellie and her daughter Luca arrive at the house to resume as the new house assistants. One of the reasons Kelvin also bought the house is because of the bath. He has always been dreaming of having a bath in his own house. Kelvin is about to go to sleep when Melfina arrives. She has now made adjustments and can now be summoned through one of her avatars. Kelvin summons her and a beautiful angelic woman with wings appears in the room. The following morning, Kelvin introduces Melfina to the rest of the party members. Melfina tries to apologize to Sarah for summoning the hero that defeated her father, but Sarah says there is no need. It was needed because Gustav was getting out of hand already, and he needed to be stopped. Melfina has wings concealed to hide her status from the rest of the world. Melfina also claims that she is Kelvin's wife. Kelvin comes up with the idea to start calling Melfina Mel. This is to stop people from catching on that she is the supreme being of reincarnation. Later on, Melfina grants Kelvin the grace of Melfina, the supreme being of reincarnation. The grace has two effects. One, it protects Kelvin from fatal damage once a month. Secondly, it grants Kelvin the power to summon heroes. However, he can only do this just once. Up next, Kelvin is seen reminiscing about the heroes. He wonders if they made it to the Western continent safely. He also realized that the heroes had it tough to adapt because they have memories from their past lives. He wonders if only the hero is meant to defeat the Demon King. Can't it be anyone, for example, the Beast King of Gone, who is an S-rank adventurer? He is said to be the strongest in the Eastern continent. Later that day, Melfina finds Kelvin where he is having his worrisome thoughts. Melfina knows something is troubling Kelvin, and she asks him about it. Kelvin asks Melfina why they need heroes to defeat the Demon King. Melfina explains that she doesn't know who the next Demon King will be, but they have all had something in common. They have a power that multiplies the evil within them. Secondly, this power grants them invisibility. They are immune to any damage. Kelvin is shocked and gets more curious. He wants to know how the Demon Kings are defeated. Melfina explains that the Demon Kings might be invisible to attacks from people in this world, but they are vulnerable to attacks from people that come from other worlds. This is where the heroes come into play. Kelvin realizes that his attacks will definitely work on the Demon King. Melfina adds that there are two ways to bring people into the fantasy world. You either teleport them directly from their world, just like the case of Toya and his friends. You can also reincarnate a dead soul into the fantasy world. Reincarnation is the best because it grants the person the option to pick skills that he or she wants. This will make them strong, just like the case of Kelvin. That night, Kelvin decides to summon a hero that he will personally train. Melfina explains how to go about it, and he also drinks a potion that replenishes his MP. Kelvin begins the summoning and a big circle appears on the floor. Moments later, a young girl emerges and introduces herself as Ryo Seiki. She seems excited to have been reincarnated, but she passes out before any more discussion could take place. Kelvin also passes out because his MP is exhausted. Shortly afterward, Ryo wakes up and you can see the excitement on her face. She tells Kelvin that she was bedridden throughout her past life. She couldn't move around like everybody else, but now she can. Ryo remembers all these because she chose to keep her memories. Ryo thanks Kelvin for summoning her and making her know how it feels to walk around. Kelvin suggests that they need to change her name because he doesn't like the current one. Ryo suggests that she changes her name to Ryan, and Kelvin accepts. Kelvin also tells Ryan to tell everyone else that she is his little sister from a distant land. Ryan agrees to this and even chooses a cute name to call her new big brother. Up next, Kelvin takes the whole family to the dark purple forest for training. He also brings Ellie and Lugh with him. He wants their level to increase too. He already has golems guarding the mission, so there is nothing to worry about. Kelvin will be using his experience sharing skill to distribute points to Lugh and Ellie. He wants to prepare them in case anything bad is to happen. The girls will also be able to defend themselves. The more the party members defeat monsters, the more XP Lugh and Ellie will get. Kelvin tells Sarah, Gerard, and Clotho to venture into the forest and defeat as many monsters as they can. Sarah and Gerard quickly turn it into a challenge of who will defeat the most monsters. Moments later, a shadow wolf appears, and Kelvin defeats it before forming a contract with it. He then hands over the wolf to Ryan as her new pet. Soon afterward, Erd and his party arrive in the forest to train also. Erd is in the forest for his entrance examination to get promoted to B rank. Erd compliments Kelvin for having such beautiful girls in his party. Erd's party members get jealous, and get even more jealous when they learn that Kelvin now has a cute little sister. Erd and his party leave after greeting Kelvin and his party. Not long after, Sarah, Clotho, and Gerard come back. Turns out that the trio has defeated all the monsters inside the forest already, and Erd would have nothing to defeat now. Kelvin finds Erd and apologizes to him, but Erd lets him know that it is all good. Erd says his party is now very strong and Kelvin even deserves to be S rank by now. Upon getting back home, Ryan washes her pet and names the wolf Alex. It is revealed that Ryan can also understand Alex. Turns out that she has the skill for that. After this, Ryan begins her training with Gerard and Sarah. She is taken under intense training drills to improve her skills. One night, Kelvin figures out that a group of bandits is surrounding the mansion. Kelvin scans their status and realizes that they are all of the low levels. He tasks Rion with defeating the bandits, but she should leave their leader for him. Kelvin gives Rion the new sword he made for her. Rion gets on it and starts to knock out all the bandits one after the other. After she is done with the bandits, Kelvin finds their leader and corners him. It turns out that the bandits were sent by the Tricen Nation. Kelvin plans to heal the wounded bandits and hand them over to the guild. Elsewhere, the Emperor of Trycen, Zen Trycen, calls for a round-table meeting with his generals. The group concluded that their nation might be in peril after Kristoff was captured. One of the generals, Tristan, suggests that they go to war against the other three countries and claim the continent for themselves. He says they have been strengthening their military while the other countries are still living on the Treaty of Peace. The Emperor leaves the decision with his generals. 2 generals support the motion while 2 others oppose it. Now that the decision is tied, they need to consult the 5th general, Clive. With the way Clive is, it is apparent that he will vote in support of the war. General Clive is the leader of the Magic Knights, and he has never been one to shy away from a fight. In fact, he enjoys making trouble. After handing over the assassins to the guild, Leo informs Kelvin that Trycen has started making some moves. It's nothing major at the time, but they need to be careful. Gone is the country bordering Trycen, and they have reported movements. Leo then tells Kelvin that Leon Gone, the Beast King, has invited him over. Leon wants to test Kelvin and see if he is worthy of being an S-rank adventurer. Shortly afterward, Kelvin and his party get on their way to Gone. As they approach a village close that is under Gone's jurisdiction, Ethel says she has a weird feeling. Melfina reveals that the village they are approaching is an elven village, and since Ethel is half-elf, she is bound to have a tingling sensation. It is revealed that elves were originally from the western continent, but some of them moved to the eastern continent some years back. As the journey continues, Sarah points out that you need to have the approval of at least 2 rulers before you are granted the S rank. Tsubaki already gave her approval, but Leon wants to test Kelvin before giving his approval. Suddenly, they are stopped by a group of elves that are guarding the village. Kelvin shows them the seal from Leon and reveals that they are not their enemies. The village chief, Nelrus, shows up to meet Kelvin. He sees Ethel and gets taken aback like he has seen someone he knows. He calls Ethel by another name, Lumel. Nelrus takes them into the village and reveals that he has mistaken Ethel for someone else. Kelvin then asks Nelrus to tell them about Lumel. Kelvin says it might be a clue as to where Ethel came from. Ethel was sold into slavery when she was a kid, and she doesn't even know any of her family members. Nelrus says they once lived in a forest on the western continent. They were attacked by a fire dragon king. The Dragon King claims that one elf ridiculed him, and they need to produce the elf if they don't want him to raze down the village. This comes as a shock to the elves because they don't even know the elf that ridiculed the dragon. The Dragon King's wrath burned through the village, and half of the village was dead already. That was when one of their elves, Lumel, offered to sacrifice herself to the Dragon King. The Dragon King opted to take Lumel as his wife instead. Years later, Lumel's body was found in the forest. Out of fear that the Dragon King would attack again, the elves packed their things and fled the continent, and settled on the eastern continent. They have been under the protection of Gone since then. The group puts out the theory that there is a possibility that Lumel is Ethel's mother. This might be the reason Nelrus mistook her for Lumel. Nelrus then tells Kelvin that monsters from Trycen have started attacking the village. Kelvin promises that he won't allow the monsters to lay a finger on them. Kelvin and his party decide to lay a trap for Trycen's army and their controlled monsters. Later that night, Trycen's army is seen advancing to the village. Suddenly, they are attacked by Kelvin and his party. The party eliminates all the battalions that were advancing to the village. Ryan, Melfina, and Alex make their way to the camp. The commander is happy when he sees 2 girls that looked weak coming toward the camp. The commander blows a magical flute that summons a gigantic monster. Melfina tells Ryan that it is time for her to step up. She needs to show that all the time in her training has not been wasted. Melfina assures Ryan that she is stronger than she thinks. Because of these words of motivation, Ryan summons the courage and goes after the gigantic monster. Accompanied by Alex, Ryan launches an attack, but the monster repels it and breaks her sword. Ryan gets angry and summons 2 more powerful swords that Kelvin had made for her. She casts a spell that seems to have eliminated the monster. Just then, the monster evolves into a fiery monster. Ryan isn't even scared, and she easily defeats the monster with the same spell from before. The commander sees this and falls to his knees. He cannot believe that a little girl just wiped out the entire army and their backup monster. Suddenly, General Clive arrives and launches a surprise attack on Kelvin, but he easily displaces the spell. Clive tries to use a slavery spell on Ethel, but Kelvin blocks it. He tells Clive that he will not lay one finger on his woman or any of his party members. Kelvin uses his appraisal eye on Clive and figures out that he was also reincarnated. Kelvin tells Ethel to join the rest of the party inside the village walls while he battles Clive. Kelvin forms 5 strong spears to attack Clive, but he uses a barrier to block the attack. Clive says the spears would have been destroyed once they touched the barrier. This points out that the spears are very strong also. As the fight enrages, Kelvin is wearing a smile because he is enjoying the battle. Clive charms his whole party to attack Kelvin. Kelvin tasks his golems to take care of Clive's party while he battles Clive himself. However, he instructs the golems not to harm Clive's party members because they are under his charm. Kelvin plans to break the charm after the battle is over. Kelvin and Clive continue to go head-to-head with their spells. Kelvin attacks Clive with a spell that leaves a cut on his face. Clive gets angry and uses his most powerful spell, but Kelvin brings out his latest weapon, the Backstaff Disaster, which is rated S rank. Kelvin then activates a powerful spell too. The duo goes against each other, but Kelvin slices through Clive's spell and cuts off his legs. Kelvin is about to finish him off when Tristan arrives and takes custody of Clive. Tristan agrees that Kelvin has won the battle, but they won't allow him to finish off Clive. Tristan disappears before Kelvin decides to attack them. Kelvin returns to the village and regroups with his party. Nelrus tells his people to prepare a banquet in celebration of Kelvin's win. Now in Trisen's country, Clive has been healed, and his legs are back to normal. However, Clive is now restrained inside a test facility. Tristan informs him that several experiments will be carried out on him because he is reincarnated. Clive serves as the perfect test subject that they need. This might be in preparation for their battle against Kelvin. Up next, the village chief gives Ethel a headband that belonged to Lumil. All the villagers also treat her very well, even though she is a half-elf. Just then, a little girl shows up and introduces herself as Leon Heartgone. Leon reveals that he can take any form he wants, and has decided to show up as a little girl. Leon reveals that he watched Kelvin's battle against Clive. He is now convinced that Kelvin is worth the S rank. In 4 days, the promotion ceremony will be held. Kelvin will also have mock battles against other S-rank adventurers. Upon hearing this, Kelvin couldn't hide his excitement that he will get to go against other S-rank adventurers.